Commissioners, the next item is item number 7, an application for a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, docket number 162063, 140 West 81st Street, Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. A Romanesque Revival style church building designed by John F. Caspin and built in 1893. Application is to demolish portions of the building, construct additions, alter masonry openings on the front facade, and relocate stained glass windows. This is zoned R8D.
Well, then we can set it back here.
It's fine for me, but it's just, we're gonna get obscuring or something.
Well, we love it all. Yeah.
These guys can push right.
Yeah, see, just make sure it's okay with projection. Is that okay?
Yes.
Let's just push it back just a little bit. That's all right. And then the materials, let's put the materials right up here.
Okay. Caroline, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Caroline Lee Newton from the Conservation Department. The application before you concerns alterations to the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church located at 140 West 81st Street between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. And these alterations are to accommodate two uses in the building. The building will be modified and reconfigured to accommodate residential use above, with the church relocated to the first and lower levels. On the front facade, along with masonry restoration throughout, the main entrance will be lowered for barrier-free access. Doors will be created at windows for separate entrances for the church and for egress. Windows will be replaced and modified here and here. And signage will be installed located here and here. At the roof and rear, the building will be reconfigured by cutting it back and rebuilding the ground floor in salvage masonry. The upper levels with glass and terracotta. Stained glass windows will be relocated from the existing sanctuary to a new sanctuary being created in a space at the lower level. And I'd like to pass it on to the team, led by Jordan Rogov of DXA Studio.
Thank you, Caroline. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jordan Rogoff. I'm a partner at DXA Studio. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Before we get into too much detail about the design of our proposed design today, we want to give you a little bit of context, a little bit of insight into the goals for our project. The primary goal being a conversion of the building to mixed use. What that allows is a congregation that's been in this neighborhood for some 39 years, the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church congregation, to remain on site, occupying the bottom 2 floors, and then benefiting from the sales of air rights for residential floors up above. To give you insight into the congregation, we've asked the head of our team, Pastor Charles Eatman, to say a few words today.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come and to share with you today. I have been the pastor for the Mount Pleasant Church for over 3 decades. And I came to Mount Pleasant back in 1981. And at that time, the church was in decay and has continued to decay, not having the kind of resources that we would need to put it into shape. So that the development project is a fantastic opportunity for the church to be renewed, for the congregation and the social and spiritual mission that we have to go forward. We have been engaged as a beehive of activity 7 days a week. We had to leave there almost a year ago because things are in such a deplorable condition, as you will see as you look at what we're going to show you today. But we've been engaged with the community. I lived on the West Side for about 25 years myself. I raised all my children there. And we love being on 81st Street, and we can't wait to get back. And so I wanted to share with you that this congregation has been engaged with the community, social responsibilities, responsibilities in terms of people who have great needs, who are wandering in the community, children, academics, preschool through senior citizens, involved with the fundraising projects. We have done some wells in Africa, and the good people of our block association and others in the community support our project. We take our students to international experiences all around the world, and the community helps us to do it. And so I wanted to just share with you the basic of where we are as a congregation. We're looking forward to going back to 81st Street where we can continue our spiritual and social work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. The site is located 140 West 81st Street. That's 81st Street on the south side of the block between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues. And that's obviously in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. Existing conditions, we have some tax photos from 1940 and 1980 on the right. What's notable about these tax photos is you'll see in the 1940s, all of the original stained glass windows remain on the front facade. By 1980, they had fallen into a state of disrepair and had been removed, with the exception of the stained glass under the portico. The rose window has a plexiglass cover, which we intend to remove, but leave the rose window in place. And then there's one stained glass window still remaining here. So we'll get into the particulars of the kind of preservation effort for the stained glass a little later. Also, large signage was present through multiple congregations occupying the church building. We're not proposing to bring in anything quite this size, something a little more discreet, but signage is necessary to be the face of the community and understand that the church still remains at the site. Here are some photos of the facade, portico, and then the stairs in the portico. We're proposing a few alterations, which we'll show shortly. In the sanctuary, stained glass is in terrific shape. I believe, Mary, it's an opalescent glass. There's no iconography present, and it's actually the same pattern repeated throughout. The rose window, as I mentioned, remains. The windows under the portico are to remain as well. And then here, to really get to the nitty-gritty of the current state of the building, there's quite a bit of ferrous staining, biological growth on the sides of the building, and that's all the result of a roof that's in terrible condition, leading to major water infiltration issues throughout the sanctuary and community spaces. As Pastor Eamon had mentioned, the congregation had to leave the property about a year ago. Massing studies to give you a sense of the footprint of the building. The total church area is about 10,800 square feet. Its massing relative to the block it occupies the entirety of the lot and extends all the way back to the rear property line. What we are proposing is to be in compliance in converting to a mixed-use building, and for the residential portion, we're proposing to actually cut back the church area. Actually, let me show you here. Cut back some 30 feet to be in compliance. The church maintains most of its footprint, just under 10,000 square feet, with the sanctuary level at grade. and then community facilities on the floor below. The pastor will remain on the premises with a two-bedroom unit accessible through the portico, keeping those doors engaged and active rather than sealing them up. We'll get into the kind of rationale behind the massing a little bit later. Just want to show you kind of the program distribution initially. From the very first moment we set foot in the church, the community was very involved in all of the decisions and present, and the response actually cutting back the church and its projection into the donut was very well received. In particular, these series of 9-story buildings behind us are built to just, I think, 10 feet off the property line. So what that does is it actually triples the amount of area and light and air and opens up the donut, one byproduct of bringing the building into compliance as a mixed use. Regarding the enlargement of the church, visibility we tried to maintain to minimal visibility. And in this area right here, there's about a 60 to 70 foot long area across the street, directly across the street and to the west, where the addition is minimally visible. We've rendered view 3 here to give you a sense of what that would look like. And we have some more renderings to show as we go. Facade study, there's quite a bit of remedial work. The majority of it would, I guess, a staff level approval, so we don't need to get in its entirety. But nonetheless, there will be significant repairs made to the facade. The facade's composed of a limestone rusticated base, and then it's actually rusticated bricks from that datum and up. Before we contemplated any major alterations to the building in both massing and alterations to fenestration to bring the building into compliance, we have a team member, Gregory Dietrich, who's our historical consultant, did a lot of research in helping us understand Romanesque revival churches. What that did is that helped us, again, when we had to evaluate how to bring the building into compliance. There was an area, as Caroline had mentioned, on the 3rd floor where those windows needed to be enlarged to meet those standards. So in studying all of these precedents, we kind of devised the rationale, the logic, and maintained the hierarchy in relationship of the lower windows, gradually going up to the upper levels to much slender, taller windows. So what we're proposing is to enlarge these windows by some 21 inches, which ends up being the exact module of the limestone frame, and then 8 bricks of the rusticated bricks. A little more detail. Regarding the stained glass, as I mentioned, the stained glass under the portico remains in very good condition, not surprisingly. The rose window, an effort had been made prior to that 1980 tax photo to enclose that and protect that. What we want to do is remove the plexiglass as it's obscured the stained glass and bring in a glass, a transparent, protective, ventilated cover so that the stained glass is visible from the exterior again. All of the original stained glass had been removed through the years, as we showed you. All of these light blue. We would take the same profile and do new windows, wood windows painted. The existing wood windows are in terrible shape, but we want to match those profiles and these operable sashes. And this kind of whimsical, uneven sashes up at the top of the tower, absolutely going to keep that. This stained glass is actually in pretty bad shape, and what we're proposing is, if we can restore it, it would be relocated to the ground floor interiors, and then keep that symmetrical, the vision and high performance glazing in the historical profiles. And then here's just to give you a detail, the depth, the windows are recessed by a little more than 9 inches on the masonry facade. That is all to be maintained. At the base of the building, the base of the east and west towers, what we're proposing is to lower the sill, because with the change of use are entirely different egress considerations. So what we're proposing is for the east tower, the base, to extend that sill down and allow that for a dedicated fire egress for both the church area and the residential. The central area under the portico, the central doors become the entry to the residential component, and then the church entry is the extended window on the west tower. One other consideration in changing use is making this ADA compliant. So what we're proposing is actually cutting out the granite-based first step of the portico and cutting it back so that it composes individual treads for both the portico flights of stairs and then positive sloping up to the existing doors for again, universal accessibility. And then the church entry would also be at grade with an elevator and stairs located adjacent. We're also proposing signage and additional lighting. Lighting just very minimal as to not be confused to be part of the original church. It's very minimal cylindrical light on either side of each one of the doors. For signage, something very in line with what we presented for the Barclay Vesey building, which is a channel that's affixed to the datum, the top of the rusticated base, and then that would just be an LED fixture that backlights extruded metal lettering. Here's a rendering of what that would look like. So again, identification for the residential entry, identification for the church entry. Here is an elevation, a rendered elevation. Again, I think a consideration in speaking with staff early on was that the portion of this church really it is maintained as the tallest point on the composition with the alteration. That is the case here, but nobody ever really experiences a building in elevation, so we felt that it's a little bit easier to understand both model form and as a rendering. Something that was also very important in early conversations with staff and in our development of design was maintaining a vestige of the original church building, and that was taking the peak of the pediment and extending that back as the expression on the rear facade as well. And we think that was a highly effective move. As far as the envelope for the enlargement on the upper floors, it's a very simple system that we've worked with manufacturer Schuco put together, which is a curtain wall system with an integrated slat rails, which have terracotta baguettes located with about 4 inches, I guess 4 inches between, so 6 inches on center. It's an off-the-shelf system, something very simple. We very much like the dialogue between a more contemporary manner of using terracotta, in that the original church roof was terracotta. So to give you a sense of kind of the quality of that space, being very open and transparent at that level and appearing a little more solid for the minimally visible portions on the facade. On the rear, here is the existing rear facade of the church, and then here's what we're proposing for the residential portion. Again, the church remains down here in the original church envelope. The south wall remains. And here are elevations. One thing to point out here is that even though we are proposing primarily a glass elevation, that the operable portions of it are in keeping with the punched openings of the buildings that surround the donut in the rear yard. Here are some details on the curtain wall system. And then a rendering which appears a little bit dark up here, but that's the idea that this is glass back here. This is the original envelope of the church, the south wall.
And that's the actual wall?
This is the actual wall to
Yeah.
remain, correct. But we do have to cut off to be compliant up above, I think it's about 13'6" is the height. The stained glass in the sanctuary, again, we have a team member here, Mary Jablonski, who helped us. She's our materials expert on the project and helped us investigate the stained glass, and the existing profiles can actually all be removed and stained glass maintained intact and removed to the sanctuary, which will now be at grade. Here's an elevation elevation showing the kind of transition from 5-story buildings up to our proposed 7-story and a 10-story neighbor to the west. Precedents, we just wanted to kind of briefly show you a project that was very meaningful to us in putting together our proposal, and that was Jean Nouvel's Opera House in Lyon, and what we felt was a very sympathetic and appropriate balance of kind of contemporary addition to a historic building. And the slatted systems, there are a number of projects that have done this successfully, and again, it's an off-the-shelf system, very straightforward. We looked at a number of church conversions to residential projects. The majority of them were single-family, kind of enormous homes, but there were the occasional church projects that had been, in our estimation, parsed out a little too much, and a lot of the church did not remain. We felt it was very important to kind of celebrate in our layouts as much of the extant church as possible. Layouts, I think we only want to point out one element, and that is the mechanical system at the roof. What we're doing is we're proposing a split system so that we have just very small briefcase condenser units, which are located up in the center of the roof. With our visibility studies, they are not visible from any perspective, so we have gone to great lengths to minimize the amount of mechanical present. Materials, I think we have a number of the materials here. What was originally proposed was an iron oxide brick on both the east and west sides of the church. After presenting to the community board, I think there was concern in the light well to the west of the church that in erecting that wall, they wanted to see something a little lighter. So we found a lighter brick that we can apply there, so it isn't quite the dark presence on the west side of the church. This is a sample of the terracotta system, and then this would be the color for both the window profiles on the existing church as well as the glass portion of what we're proposing.
So I'm sorry, the roof that you have in the front facade that you can see from the street, what material is that and which color?
Sure. The roof material right here is actually glass, and it has kind of small pieces of terracotta to extend.
Okay, so it has a similar system to
Yeah,
the system?
let me just go back, just so. Here we go.
Okay,
So this is just a glass curtain wall system with
Okay.
these extruded rails, and then the terracotta spans across. So that's what you see right there, is
I
the
see.
terracotta slats, and then that's all glass behind.
Since I think one of the things that you said that you tried to do was somehow retain what is there currently in terms of the roof form and its peaked roof. So have you thought about lowering this big portion to at least match the,
Absolutely.
and what would be the implications of that?
Sure, we did. We actually studied that, because that would mean lowering this roof by some 30 inches. What's difficult is that the existing windows on the church really set where the slabs, where the floor plates need to be.
Can you show that as in section to us, please?
Sure, no problem. Let me see. So the window locations really set where the floor plates can be, and in particular the rose window that really sets what happens at this floor. To take off 30 inches or 2.5 feet, which is what we need to do to get below the peak of the pediment, results in the loss of a floor.
Does it, will it actually be a loss of a floor?
Yes, because then you would drop below 8 foot clear
But-
under slab.
And if you just reduced the, okay, I don't know what the heights are. Are these the minimum heights that you've got for each floor, or they're?
We're trying to get to some 10 feet, but I believe we're at 10-foot floor to floor with a 10-inch concrete slab. So yeah, so what what would happen is if we come down below that, we're left with like about 8-foot floor to ceiling in the penthouse units.
Can I ask another
Okay.
question?
Yes, Adi, go ahead.
I think I'm not clear on the changes to the existing facade windows.
Sure.
Can you show the existing facade and then the changes in heights
Sure.
and explain why you're doing that? I
Okay.
mean,
So what we're proposing here on the 3rd floor is actually taking this block dimension and adding another one of those, which is 21 inches,
Why?
to enlarge, because of the calculations for compliance with DOB light
For light and air.
requirements.
They have, if you,
Windows,
you have s-
On
have
that
s-
side?
If that's, of each room.
every room, every habitable room needs to meet the minimum requirements. So that's the one area of deficiency that we had in the project.
That's the only place.
No,
That's the only place.
because I thought you were showing it on the top.
Oh, no, only.
Three as well.
Only at this level.
Mhm.
And again, the examples that we studied, we came up with kind of a formula that's used with all the Romanesque revival examples that we found. And enlarging it still works and still maintains that hierarchy between the 3 levels, different fenestration.
Okay, yes, Roberta, and then Diana.
So the floor, in the section of floors that you're talking about not being able to lower, those are floors that connect to existing floors? So your new floors connect to existing floors at that level?
Well, yeah, the slabs on this side are really set, given their relationship to the windows. If you were
But
to
it's-
lower it down and have a sill up here, it's not really feasible.
So what's the last floor, the highest floor?
The highest floor
Existing-
right here
existing right now.
is set by the rose window. There's no way to really cut the rose windows. That kind of
No, but I'm just saying,
No.
so what is that highest floor existing now?
The highest floor existing, in the church
In
building?
the church?
Oh, okay, that is right here. So it's actually 2 stories above where the highest floor is.
Yeah. And that floor to ceiling at the, is it the fourth floor is what?
I'm sorry, at this floor where the rose window is, this is 10-foot-8 floor to floor in the back portion, but that steps up again to accommodate the rose window. I think
But it's
another-
10-foot-8 in the back, and above that, you have 2 floors that are also
You
10
have-
feet, you're saying, right?
Yeah, this is 10
That's
feet,
11.
and then this is 11, but 11, that has the whole roof sandwich on it, which is at least 12 inches with insulation. and
Okay, it's not the
structure.
clear height, it's
But
the.
Yeah, exactly, sorry.
But then it could be, those 2 floors could be, I mean, it could be 9, you know.
It could
9
be reduced a
feet
little bit, but if
instead.
you go all the way down to the peak of the pediment, which was the question, and that ends with, the end result is the loss of a floor.
Are the top 2 floors separate units, or are they one joint unit?
That's one unit right here, as a duplex in the front currently.
And if you lose a floor, what does that mean? It just means like you have just,
It means it's.
It's square
the
footage?
project's of questionable viability.
because that square footage cannot be reclaimed elsewhere? Or is it
Correct.
because,
Correct. This is within the as-of-right envelope. It was very important that
Right.
everything we did was.
you have some areas where you have double height space, so you could, I don't know if it'll be able to capture everything, but I think on the
There
third floor.
is right here, but that area actually also has light and air issues. That's why there is a double height area.
I see, to bring in more light and air.
Correct. If you were to strike a line across the windows that are under the portico, then you would not have windows for the floor in that area above.
So how many units do you get?
We have 7 right now, but we've also modeled it as a 10-unit building, but so it'll be between 7 and 10 units.
Okay. The only reason I asked about bringing the height down, and I don't know if it's a discernible difference from the street, but from elsewhere, from a bird's eye view, I think it rationalizes the roof better than what you have down right now. Yes.
So on that same,
God can see it too. That's our new standard.
Okay, so Diana and then Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question about the context of the rear. You have a board 35, which shows that, you know, you have buildings with punched openings. You don't have any photos actually of the interior of the donut though, right? What kind of buildings are adjacent to this building? I just want to get a sense of its content.
Yeah, no, we don't have
facades.
photos. We were, we talked to a number of people in the board association and have been trying to set up appointments to get back in there, but we haven't been able to do that yet. We have these from the kind of aerial photos. So we put this together from kind of, a number of different sources, but yeah.
So you don't really know what's there
No,
except
we do.
adjacent to
From the
brick
from the
buildings. Yeah.
aerial shots, we know generally, but we don't have close-up and high-quality images to present today.
Are they, are they brick buildings?
Yes.
Unpainted brick, and, I mean, generally
Yes,
just brick.
generally unpainted brick buildings.
And they're
I'm
pretty-
sorry.
pretty, as you're illustrating these two examples on each side. How do you?
I think they're much more in line with this right here.
Uh-huh.
The buildings directly across from here are more in line with this 10-story building. And then everything to the east is much more like a typical townhouse.
Well, we see a lot of different
Oh, sure.
rears for townhouses, so
Sure.
that's why I'm asking the question. Okay, so the other question is, so the punched opening effect that you're seeking to derive, you made reference to just, you're trying to indicate there are make this
Portions
appear to
of
be
the
windows,
openings.
so you really don't seem to do a lot in that regard in the back there. That's
Yeah, it's not a literal, we're
I
just
know.
taking the size, the proportions of
And then
the
just
optical
repeating,
size.
but without any, there's no variation, so to speak, in the thing, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Okay, just a question for you. We were talking a little bit about the impact of the volume of the mansard basically on the front. Would it be feasible to keep the unit count as you need it, or the floor area as you need it, by shifting some of the volume back away from the street and maybe modifying the profile of the mansard at the rear? So that instead, you're not changing the net quantity of floor area, but you're just shifting that volume back off the street?
I think we're kind of hemmed in on the rear with the 30-foot setback
Which is this,
requirement.
but
And then
that's
there's
that
a-
plane.
about the top.
Right, that's that plane. Yes, I'm talking about, you have a mansard in the front and a mansard in the back.
Oh, and square this off as
Either
opposed
square
to
it
keeping
off,
them
or change the
symmetrical.
angle, or something else. I mean, would that offer a way to achieve what some people are suggesting here about, it sounds like there's some discomfort about the volume.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing I would say, there's a little bit of a trade-off, only because I think if you turn the model around or something, you see, you've tried to keep this apex at the back
Correct.
because it's reflective of the existing church's profile, is that
Right,
correct? I mean,
that's correct.
somewhat, okay.
Right.
Michael,
And
what were you
the
suggesting? Right.
cruciform pattern, we felt was
Critical.
both in keeping in the Romanesque revival typology, but it also addresses a number of pragmatic concerns, and that is the core location and vertical circulation.
No, yeah, but I think I'm trying to understand Michael's idea.
Oh, no, yeah. So what you're saying is essentially, could you shift this up?
Okay, but still
Shift
keep that
back.
peak.
The answer is no at the top floors, because there's a required kind of secondary setback that happens above, I believe it's 45 feet. So you wouldn't be able to recoup all of that. You would at one of the floors.
Where's the setback though?
The setback you can see is that first balcony right here. So the top two floors, are right, setback 10 feet.
And the second question I have for you is, you've chosen you made the statement that you were kind of using the terracotta baguettes as a way to recall or interact with the terracotta roof. Tell me why you chose that color then.
I agree. It's
yeah,
a
no,
little bit of a
no, that's a good
contradiction,
question.
right? Yes.
We started off with a much more literal relationship with the orange, terracotta to kind of be
Mhm.
one-to-one. However, it's just so present inside of the units looking out. It was just overwhelming.
Couldn't it be treated, I don't know, whether you can treat it. It seems like, at least from the street level, when you see this roof behind it, and
Right.
it's abstracted in terracotta, but the gray color seems to contrast with, I think, the historical
Right.
terracotta.
I think the other aspect is that when you go to the same color, whether it's with the masonry or terracotta of the Exton Church, there's a little bit of confusion as to kind of what's new, what's old. And we
But it
wanted
is
to-
being treated somewhat differently
Yeah,
with slats.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Oh, what was that, Michael?
God
Okay. Yes, Roberta.
In terms of visibility, can we see any of this from the street?
You
Can
can.
see the-
I think it's good to
Yeah,
just go back
I
to
mean-
that.
And I guess I'm more concerned now about
Yeah.
the actual mechanical or the bulkhead, the
That you
stair
don't
bulkhead
see.
on the roof. That
Yeah,
don't
you see none of the mechanical, nor the bulkheads. We pushed that all back so that the adjacent buildings, conceal.
Right, there's some,
Okay.
these are the views.
So here you go. Here are the visibility studies, and what we've represented are the most visible views from the street. So that would be located from here and from here.
And are there other terracotta roofs in the area? In the vicinity? It's only in the church.
And then church, yeah,
So
the
you're
original
only
church
comparing it,
roof.
which then you're comparing it to the church and
Right.
you're sitting right in front of the existing ones. So I guess I'm thinking that in terms of color, it should be more important what you see from the street than what you see from
See,
the
inside.
Inside, right. We don't really care about what
Yeah.
what it is from inside. That you can figure it out, you paint it or something. It doesn't matter to us, but I think you should, I actually think it would be, I think it's a serious consideration about that. Okay. Any other comments? All right, we can take, questions right now? We can take testimony then? Thank you, we may call you back,
All right,
Jeremy.
thank you.
Okay. Barbara Zay?
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. While the conversion of religious structures into residential is an unfortunate shift in our city's urban landscape, there is much to commend about this generally sensitive approach to a difficult problem. HDC appreciates the effort made in the front to work with the existing church facade. In particular, the terracotta baguettes are a nice gesture to the church's tile roofs. Our committee's only reservation about this proposal is the entirely glass rear facade, and would ask that further study be done to soften this starkly modern gesture. Thank you.
Thank you. Donald Press?
My name is Donald Press. As president, I represent the West 81st Street Block Association. The Mount Pleasant Baptist Church at 140 West 81st Street is a significant entity in our Upper West Side Historic District, and especially on our street. The current application is for a substantial rebuilding and repurposing of this historic building, as has already been described. The West 81st Street Block Association has considered the alternatives and, with some reservations, has decided to support the proposed renovation. This position is taken with great regret at the loss of the sanctuary and the historic function of the larger building. However, we appreciate both A, the changing circumstances and financial realities of the renovation, and B, the relative sensitivity of the new design. A, with regard to the financial realities, the Block Association has worked with the church administration for past decades to try to ameliorate the deterioration of the church fabric due to the shrinking congregation and shrinking funding for upkeep and repairs. We are compelled by these realities to support a repurposing of part of the building and condition, A, that it stabilizes the finances of the church for the foreseeable future in a responsible manner, and B, stabilizes the structure in a way that preserves the historic fabric of this landmark district and the quality of the life on the block. From what we can understand of the arrangement, this application fulfills both functions. With regard to aesthetic sensitivity, we applaud the church and associated developers for their transparency and openness to community input and for sensitivity to the landmark concerns. We appreciate, one, the facade will be maintained intact with only minor and sensitive adjustments that retaining the historic street landscape. Two, the building will continue to function in part as a church or community hall, thus retaining an integrity of form and function, and particularly retaining the historic context of the facade. Three, the reduction of some mass in the rear will enhance rather than detract from the rear donut, providing a greater consistency with adjoining brownstone gardens. 4, the added bulk at roof level has made sensitive use of slopes and louvers to minimize intrusiveness and to integrate the addition with the existing facade and peaked roof. And 5, the conversion of much currently unused tax-free space to taxable residential space is a positive contribution to our city finances. In conclusion, while recognizing the losses involved, the general intent and design appear to be a good example of repurposing a historic building in a financially efficient and sensitive manner.
Thank you. Rick Bell?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the chance to testify here today in support of the project. The AIA New York chapter, where I'm executive director, has some 5,000 architect and affiliate members here in New York City, and we're keenly interested in the manner in which preservation, neighborhood context, and the production of housing and other needed facilities can coexist in a diverse and dynamic city. We're here today in regard to the proposal on 81st Street, where a dwindling congregation has seemed to doom the ongoing presence of a remarkable Romanesque revival church, a structure that is not only, that's not an individually designated landmark, but having lived a block away on 82nd Street a bunch of years ago, I know how important it is on the block. I would like to say that the project is complex and that the tension between the new and proposed fabric is, for us, very exciting indeed, and we like that aspect of it significantly. I'd like to speak, though, about 3 specific aspects. That the issue of obsolete or obsolescent church and synagogue structures here in New York is a citywide problem and a major one, with property values and maintenance costs at all-time highs. Teardowns remove places of worship that have fulfilled social and spiritual needs for many, many years, in some cases a century or longer. This project does allow, as we've heard, the congregation to remain in an accessible and, say, appropriately scaled space on 2 lower levels. It's not the sanctuary, but it's at least in the same building, and I think it's very important to see the return. There's a concurrent need, secondly, to maintain the continuity and variety of traditional urban streetscape, particularly on blocks like West 81st Street, where there's a good mix of housing types, and with this church as, call it a mid-block cornerstone, a lively diversity of form and function. Seeing the church removed from the block in favor of as-of-right housing would be both detrimental to the neighborhood and I think regrettable in terms of the diversity of urban fabric. And third and last, there's a desperate need for housing, as we've heard in our city, with a growing population in all 5 boroughs. Manhattan's West Side, which is well served by public transportation, has very few sites for this type of inventive insertion of new apartments. The proposal by DXA Architects is inventive and responsive to the need and to the neighborhood. Part of the testimony that I cut for fear of being over the time limit, I'll just insert out of sequence at the end. It talks about how the AIA and our Center for Architecture, which is located in a historic district in the South Village, mounted an exhibition called Architects Contrast a few years ago. It started in 2009. It's done in concert with the Landmarks Preservation Commission, as you know, and the Landmarks Foundation. It talked about how significant additions and adaptive reuse projects can find a place within designated districts which have distinctive architecture and important social history. That remarkable exhibition continues to travel and elucidate and educate issues of importance across the country. We learned a lot of lessons in putting it together, and I think they bear upon this project particularly. So thank you for having the opportunity to share these thoughts, and I look forward to being here again on similar projects in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Max Yeston?
Max Yeston, Landmark West. In a trend that has swept American cities from Portland, Maine to Seattle, Washington, churches and synagogues have had to address their financial difficulties through altering their sanctuaries to have an income-producing function. In all 5 boroughs, the LPC will be confronted with religious institutions seeking to take advantage of rising real estate values by conversion of buildings to residential and commercial uses. By definition, this poses great challenges. Religious architecture, especially Christian churches, generally have iconography, layouts, and configuration that are particularly resistant to adaptive reuse. Preservation of buildings for their intended use is always preferable, but adapting to modern economic and social reality is at the heart of constructive preservation. The Church of the Eternal Hope, and more lately, the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, is one of the countless institutions that face this challenge. Designed by Newark-based architect John F. Capon, who once served as the president of the New Jersey chapter of the AIA, Mount Pleasant is a unique Romanesque revival contribution to the architectural diversity of West 81st Street. Today, architects DXA Studio have developed an all-too-rare proposal for conversion of a traditional church for combined residential and religious use that is functional, appropriate, and altogether architecturally acceptable. The architects have devised a thoughtful plan, as of right under zoning, that incorporates low-impact changes to the street facade, innovative solutions to residential fenestration, attractive glazing on the rear facade, and a functional sanctuary for its client. Our committee chooses not to comment on the details of the design, as they are well considered as proposed. The committee notes that this parish is fortunate in that its building is mid-block, so sight lines to proposed changes from the street are minimal and available FAR is moderate. Much greater challenges, most of them architecturally unachievable, are faced by other religious institutions on the Upper West Side. Many have prominent sites with greater visibility in addition to huge FAR and development potential. Here, however, is one instance in which the Commission can approve a proposal that will be sensitive to the building and its environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? We received Community Board 7's recommendation. They approved the front facade window and door modifications and the new rooftop addition, conditioned upon the prescribed color modifications, which had to do with trying to have a color that is more reflective of the reddish-brown color of the terracotta shingles. And commends the applicant on a sensitive restoration, a thoughtful design, and excellent process of engagement with the community. They do raise a concern regarding the rear facade and recommend it should be modulated and broken down to relate better to the rear context. All right, do we have any, yes, do we have any more questions for the applicant? Would you like to respond to any of the testimony?
I think one of the considerations with Community Board 7 that we did indeed follow through on was changing the brick color on the western side of the facade. So we did take that into consideration and study that. I think also the other comment of theirs was the same comment that you guys had with regarding going to terracotta color, orange color on the terracotta. Again, we felt that led to kind of a lack of clarity of expression on the exterior, as well as kind of a diminished quality on the interior space.
Right, but however, you would be open to doing that if...
Absolutely. If the commission feels strongly, we can certainly look at that.
All right, and in terms of just say the western facade, that's the rear facade?
The western facade is actually up against this.
Oh, I see, okay, all right.
So the concern expressed by Community Board 7 was that that's actually creating a closed light well where previously the church roof had kind of slanted back.
Right.
And their concern was that that'd be too dark. So again, we switched
Oh,
to
but
much
the lighter color. Okay, all right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, then we can close the hearing. I think it's a very nice proposal, and it has, I think it's extremely positive for preservation. I think we, as a commission, recognize, as we heard testimony of various buildings that really do require to be adaptively reused and in a creative way to ensure that the historic fabric of these buildings remains. So I think they've actually done a very nice job on that. And concerns or questions or recommendations? Yes, Fred and then Adi.
No, I just want to comment too. I think having spent my entire career as an architect dealing with adaptive reuse issues, I don't think there's a more difficult one than converting a church or a synagogue into a residence. And there's lots of ways to get it really bad. This is an exemplary, the whole thing is exemplary, as it is sad to lose these incredible interior spaces, which has been commented on by everybody. My only wish, and it's only a wish, is that somehow that initial peak of the gable of the original church went all the way through rather than being pierced by the mansard. But I've in my own mind looked at it, thought about it. It's very much mostly not visible from the street. So I'm backing off on that issue altogether because I know it would reduce. I don't think it would eliminate a whole floor. You could get more square feet in there, but I'm backing off on that and just complimenting you. And I want to compliment the people who gave testimony. We're used to hearing HDC, we're used to hearing Landmark West, but we're not always used to hearing a block association give such an incredibly eloquent and thorough and succinct analysis of the whole thing. I thought that was really impressive.
All right, yes, Adi?
I agree with everything that's been said. You know, adaptive reuse is clearly a sustainable model for preservation, for development. It's worthwhile to remember Ada Louise Huxtable's point about adaptive reuse, that it's, you know, it's philosophically problematic in that it kills a little bit the very building it's trying to save. And I think, I mean, she was referring 1976. We've been talking about this for a very long time. And that's certainly the case here. You know, there is loss, but I really think tremendous sensitivity and invention, too, about what it means for this place to have another chapter. And most importantly, the fact that use remains and the congregation gets to work here going to the future is really important. So thanks.
Yes, Michael?
I agree with those comments too, and I would just suggest that along the lines of some of our conversations that have had, I think that the terracotta color or some variant on it could be both palatable to sales and a little bit more. I don't think that it would confuse or obscure the definition between the old and the new. The new is going to be completely backlit by glass at night and will have different shadow lines. It's horizontal as opposed to vertical in coursing. So I think that there's no question that having the color create some relationship with the tower terracotta roofing would be a positive thing. Also, I think that if it were possible to both lower the height of those upper floors slightly, even if it doesn't reveal the ridge, and or shift some of the volume back so that that ridge could become a tad less visible, all would be good things, but I think these can all be done at a staff level, and it's a great project. Oh, lastly, I do think that if we were shown this rear facade as a standalone project, I think it would have garnered more comment. I think it's a bit institutional and fronty for a back facade, and I think that it could be restudied to give it a little bit more volume without losing the contemporary expression.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, Roberta?
I agree with the last comments, but I guess I just want to emphasize that I think in terms of the terracotta, I'd like to see it, the roof peak floors too, the original peak not raised, but be higher or appear higher than it does now, which requires lowering the other. So I would ask that they study that. That could be done in step, but I definitely think that the terracotta color could be changed. And we're not saying what it has to be changed to exactly. It's not exactly the color that's there, but something
Right.
something that relates to that rather than to whatever, or to not relating at all.
Right, and I think we can incorporate that, yes.
No, I agree with all of Commissioner Goldblum's comments, but for me, the most important thing is the color of that terracotta, because if you can see it, if it has to remain at the height it is, the thing you actually can see from the street, from the angles that we saw, is that contrast between that color and the color of the existing towers.
Okay. All right, I closed the hearing already, right? I did close the hearing, so I think then we can move to a resolution. John, would you like to read that and just incorporate, it's a long resolution, but you read so
Well,
beautifully.
you'll give me a little help when we get to the end. In the matter of docket number 16-2063, 140 West 81st Street, the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. We are dealing with an application to demolish portions of the building, construct additions, alter masonry openings on the front facade, and relocate stained glass windows. I recommend approval, finding that the alterations to the front facade will maintain the overall character of the facade and are subtle alterations to create accessibility and code compliance in preparation for new use, that the elimination of the entry step and the lowering of the central doors will provide barrier-free access in the least intrusive way possible, that modifications to windows at the street level to create new entrances will allow the building to house new multiple uses, and that the new doors will harmonize with the materials and details of the facade, that the lighting and signage is simple and unobtrusive and will not call undue attention to itself, that most of the original stained glass windows on the front facade have been removed and replaced with unleaded colored glass, and their replacement will not result in the removal of significant historic fabric, that the proposed new windows will match the materials, configuration, profiles, details, and finish of the historic stained glass windows, and their conversion to Vision glass will aid in the adaptive reuse of the building, that the elongation of the windows at the third story and the replacement of one damaged stained glass window at the second story will also provide required light and air in conjunction with the adaptive reuse of the interior space and will not detract from the proportions of the fenestration, that the rose window will be restored and retained, preserving this significant feature on the facade, that stained glass windows within the sanctuary on the east and west side elevations will be removed, repaired, and relocated to the newly created ground floor sanctuary, that the reconfiguration of the massing will take place behind the towers of the facade and will be slightly lower than the taller tower, maintaining the dimensionality of the towers and the front portions of the gable, although we would recommend that they work with staff to figure out if there is a way to lower that massing, whether it drops below the ridge or not. That although this reconfigured massing will require removal of portions of the non-visible rear of the building, the street facade will be preserved, and this removal will not be perceptible from the street and will allow for the adaptive reuse of the building and the future preservation of the facade. That the reconfigured massing will engage the facade and will recall the form of the original roof line. That the addition will be modestly visible from the street and will appear as a cross gable, which is consistent with the massing of other historic Romanesque-style churches. That the use of a terracotta baguette system over a glass curtain will create an interesting dialogue with historic terracotta roofing materials to remain at the towers. However, there we would recommend that they consider other alternative colors for the terracotta baguettes. That the rear of the building is not visible from any public thoroughfare, that the rear of the building projects deeper into the rear yard than other buildings on the block, and except for the stained glass windows and shallow buttresses lining the side walls facing onto narrow alleyways, it is simple in design. That cutting back the rear of the church will increase the open space at the center of the block. That the new first floor extension will be built reusing salvaged brick from the deconstruction of the rear walls. That the historic brick corbelling will be recreated in the side walls, that the operable sash at the rear curtain wall will echo the proportions of the punched window openings of adjacent masonry buildings, that the mechanical equipment on the roof will be set back and located so as to not be visible from the street, that the materials and finishes throughout the building, with the exception of the gray terracotta, that is to say the iron spot brick, blackened steel, and black painted wood window frames will be harmonious with the materials palette of the historic front facade, and that the excavation in the sun cellar will be done under the supervision of a professional licensed engineer in order to protect the building and adjacent buildings from damage.
Okay, and I think, just want to say, also that the applicants will work with staff to determine a color which is more close to the terracotta color of the existing roof in terms of the front facade and the baguettes.
Commissioner Gold, did we cover all of your issues?
Did I say anything about the back facade, or leave it go?
Okay, all right.
Back facade.
The whole, isn't it the whole? Oh, he's talking about the study of the.
You could say that.
That's it. I mean, I had suggested that the glass was a bit much in
Yeah.
terms of the exterior openness, but if others don't agree, that's fine.
Okay.
I would agree.
All right, they could work with staff to study the rear facade and have a little more masonry that is reflective of other rear facades. Okay? Wait. Add staff. Okay, all right. Let's, okay, we're going to,
If they want to change, they can change. I would vote against it.
You would? You would not. Okay, so why don't we, let's scratch that out from our resolution. We're not recommending work with staff on that, that we find that the rear facade is appropriate, given that was institutional in nature, and I think Michael said it was institutional. So even though it's a residential use, historically, it's been different from other rear facades.
So that ends the recommendation.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this application's been approved.
Thank you very much.